Welcome to the YIVO Institute for Jewish Research. My name is Alex Weiser. I'm the Director of Public Programs of YIVO. And if you don't know YIVO, we're a very special place for the celebration and for the contemplation of Jewish history and Jewish culture. We have an archive and a library with over 23 million documents and over 400,000 books, which are used by researchers around the world. We also have public programs like this, a variety of classes, including a lot of Yiddish language instruction, and exhibitions, which bring the world of those collections and of Eastern European Jewish history and culture to life. So if you're new to YIVO, hope you'll join us again. And if you are not new to YIVO, thank you for joining us again, and we're pleased to have you here with us today. Without further ado, I'm going to hand it over to our Executive Director, Jonathan Brent, who is the MC for today's program.
Thank you, Alex, and thank you to everyone who is joining us from all over the world. We are very grateful for your interest. I want to begin by saying that this program is part of a series that is called Knowledge Under Siege, which is curated by Elżbieta Janicka, a historian in Warsaw. Why is it Knowledge Under Siege? I think that in Jan Grabowski's preface to the present book, Breaking the Frame, it's put very succinctly and very simply. This is knowledge under siege because in Poland there is an effort, an organized effort to create a narrative of the Holocaust and of Polish history and Jewish history and Polish-Jewish relations during World War II that relies more on political needs and political considerations than on factual truth. In 1998, Grabowski writes, the IPN, the Institute for National Remembrance, was created specifically to examine crimes against the Polish nation that has stressed Jewish guilt and Jewish complicity, mainly by focusing on alleged Jewish-Soviet collaboration. And so knowledge, historical fact, historical truth is truly at stake in the work of those who have contributed to this excellent book, Knowledge Under Siege, that has been edited by Irena Grudzińska and Konrad Matyjaszek. It is available from Peter Lang Publisher. And we, of course, will talk much more about it. To begin, though, I do want to say some words about, which I think is appropriate, some words about the place of this particular program and of the whole series at the YIVO Institute. Polish-Jewish relations have been at the core of YIVO's institutional life from its inception in 1925 in Vilna, then Poland, now Vilnius, the capital of Lithuania. Emanuel Ringelblum worked in Warsaw in the historical section of YIVO from its founding, from YIVO's founding. YIVO participated in an effort at Polish-Jewish dialogue in a joint conference with the Kosciuszko Foundation in 1979 that grew out of initiatives during the Carter administration to establish the U.S. Holocaust Memorial Museum, what is today the U.S. Holocaust Memorial Museum, a subject that Konrad writes of in his contribution to this book. Today, YIVO funds the Jan Karski and Pola Nierenska Award annually with the Jewish Historical Institute in Warsaw and sponsors annual trips to Lithuania and Poland to explore Jewish memory in those locations. YIVO has a historical debt to Poland, and we have, moreover, an intellectual, historical, and I would say sacred debt to the truth of the Holocaust. The YIVO Institute has 24 million documents that it has collected since its founding in 1925. And of these, 7 million are primary original documents pertaining to the Holocaust. It is the largest such collection outside of Yad Vashem. YIVO's Holocaust archive, portions of which we are now in the process of digitizing thanks to a gift from the Seedlings Foundation, contains contemporaneous eyewitness accounts. It contains parts of the Ringelblum archive, ghetto diaries, poetry, songs, materials of the Nazi High Command, memoirs, immigration files, materials on post-war DP camps, logbooks of concentration and extermination camps. It contains 14,400 names of children who disappeared from the Lodz ghetto, and their inscription in the book of names is all that remains of them. And it is altogether the names of those who were tortured and banished, the torment and the destruction of the Jewish people, and that's why we have this debt. It is to their memory and to ourselves that we must insist on the truth, no differently than Poles or Lithuanians, Russians or Armenians must insist on truth. But historical truth that is of the longer time often collides with political realities, political needs of the shorter time. Historical truth is complex, difficult, often partial or opaque. Political needs are of the moment. It is only stable political truth. It is the only stable and enduring basis for democracy, a tolerant, free, and open society. Our task as scholars and as members of a community committed to understanding the truth is to sort out the political from the historical and be, in the end, content with that. This is what the contributions to breaking the frame help us do, and for this, we must be deeply grateful. But historical truth is not simply a matter of fact. It is also informed and informs cultural representations, mental inclinations, how we see and therefore what we see. And therefore breaking the frame is as much about culture, literature, film, photography, architecture, and art as about political history. Jan Tomasz Gross provided the introduction to this book, and I want to quote a little bit from that introduction because I believe that it helps us create a frame for the present discussion. In Eastern Europe, the Holocaust is not a historical subject at all, Gross writes. It is contemporaneous, firmly situated in the present, and it plays a crucial role in debates about the wartime heritage of Poles, or for instance, Ukrainians or Lithuanians, collective experience. In Poland, the new awareness of complicity in the mass murder of the Jews strikes at the core of the society's self-image as victim. And the Law and Justice Party in 2015 began targeting the new historiography as offensive to Poland's national dignity because it promoted what it called a pedagogy of guilt. And so the 13 contributions of this book approach these vast subjects. The book itself includes a poem by Jacek Pocieło, translated by Elisa Vallis, that was first published in 2019, called A Word Column. But the author refers to it in the poem as a word golem of memory. And in facing the Holocaust, this word golem haunts all that we do. Irena Grudzińska Gross emigrated from her native Poland after student unrest in 1968. She studied in Poland, Italy, and the United States. She received her PhD from Columbia University in 1982. She taught East Central European history and literature at Emory, New York, Boston, and Princeton universities. She is now a professor in the Institute of Slavic Studies at the Polish Academy of Science, and in 2018, a Guggenheim Fellow. Her books include Miłosz and the Long Shadow of War, Golden Harvest with Jan Tomasz Gross, Czesław Miłosz and Joseph Brodsky, Fellowship of Poets, The Scar of Revolution. She edited books on literature and the transformation process in Central and Eastern Europe, and published numerous book chapters and articles on these subjects in the international press and periodicals. Konrad Matyjaszek is an architect and cultural studies scholar working at the Institute of Slavic Studies at the Polish Academy of Sciences in Warsaw. His work focuses on architecture and urban spaces, Polish discourses of anti-Semitism, and narratives of urban modernization. He published The Production of Jewish Space in Pre-Modern and Contemporary Poland, 2019, A History of Poland's Urban Jewish Spaces and of Cultural and Spatial Repression that defined their shape throughout the centuries. And so I'd like to begin our conversation by turning to Irena and to Konrad to talk about breaking the frame. What does this mean concretely? How do we talk? What are these frames that need to be broken?
Maybe I will start with just a sentence about this phrase. I mean, you spoke yourself, Jonathan, about the situation, the kind of the state of siege in which the knowledge about what is called Polish-Jewish relations and about Holocaust, of course, is now under. That is, this is the frame. This is kind of the generic frame we are going to. I think Konrad will talk about. But this book came out. The intention of this book was to present the work of scholars in Poland who work against that frame. But it was also breaking the frame in another sense. It was the question of the access to American or English language publications, because several of these chapters, some of them are articles, some of them are more essay-like, some of them were denied publication in English language periodicals. Some because of their form, that is the justification given the refusal was that they are more essayistic, that is that they are expressing some kind of opinion within them, and some because I think the readers were not favorable to the breaking the frame intent. So the book itself is a breaking of the frame by itself in that sense too. And maybe it would be good if you agree for me to present the book.
Yes, please.
To present it, so just so that the people know what is it about,
yes.
What it consists of. So,
if I may stop
yeah.
you for 1 second, Irena, I wanted also to mention the fact that with Elżbieta Janicka, Helena Datner,
right, yes,
she
I was trying to.
in Warsaw is a co-editor of the series,
Yeah.
Knowledge Under Siege.
Yeah, and she's one of the authors that we have in our she's among the authors that we have in this book. So now maybe I will start by showing it again, that because I wanted to start with the illustration that we have on the cover. The illustration is by Wojciech Wołyński, and it was originally presented, kind of proposed as one of the covers, drawings for a cover of the first edition of The Neighbors by Jan Tomasz Gross. That is the book that in the year 2000 started a big discussion and kind of opened the field in which this book is written. And Jonathan mentioned already that there's an introduction by Jan Tomasz Gross here. And also the last essay, about which I will be saying a few words at the end, is also about that. So in a way, about the controversy around neighbors and around the work of Jan Tomasz Gross. So in a way, this is the framework of this whole book, which is both an analysis of concrete topics, but also kind of a chronicle of how intellectually we arrived at the moment that we are in today. And the book is very rich visually. It has some photographs and illustrations. It also contains the already mentioned poem by Jacek Podsiadło. The poem, which is really another example of thinking and working towards breaking the barriers that do not allow us to think properly about the truth of what happened during the Holocaust. It's a book. It's a poem very difficult to translate. It has been translated by Alisa Valles, as you heard, who wrote also an essay, which does two things in a way. It talks about translation and about the difficulties of this translation and showing how this poem is working towards incorporating documentation into literary depiction of the post-Kielce pogrom, and a protagonist and one of the victim of the Kielce pogrom. But also she locates this poem within the tradition of Holocaust poetry. Then we have, after this poem that opens really truly the volume, we have the introduction of Jan Tomasz Gross. We have the text of Jan Grabowski that has been mentioned, quoted by Jonathan. Here I should say that Jan Grabowski used to be a member of the Center for Holocaust Research, the most important academic institution in Poland that works on the Holocaust history. And it is not really truly represented in this book, which unfortunately not everybody could have been represented. But we were looking with Konrad for people who had less access to translations into English in a way that the people from the center, who actually should have another anthology here, similar to this one. Then we have two sections, the papers divided into two sections. This division is kind of for order reasons. The first section is called literature, and it contains 4 essays that are somehow written around or devoted to literary works or authors. The first one is by me and pertains to Czesław Miłosz and 3 of his poems about Holocaust written during the war in Warsaw. The second one is by Bożena Kew, and it is about Tadeusz Różewicz and his Holocaust poetry. And the third one is by Aranzazu Calderon Puerta about the work of short stories of Ida Fink. And the fourth one is about the very important book and topic of the generation of 1920s based on the analysis of the novel by Roman Bratny, Kolumbowie, that is the Columbus generation. Then there's a second part, which has more text, and it opens with a very extensive, incredibly interesting text by Helena Dattner, which is talking about the work of her father, a very important historian, Jewish historian, Szymon Dattner, and especially about his accommodation with the Polish majority position in 1968. Then there's an essay by Anna Zawadzka on the stereotype of Judeo-communism. Then Konrad Matyjaszek's text mapping the creation of the present kind of consensus in Poland in the conversations that were initiated, as Jonathan started by Jimmy Carter, that is by a conference in which YIVO participated it was 1979, yes, 1970, yeah. Then there's a text about Catherine Stoll on the German historiography facing Shoah and its problems. Piotr Forecki's important text on March 1968 as a pogrom. Katarzyna Chmielewska, the discussion of methodological approaches to the topic of the Holocaust. Jan Borowicz's analysis of the vision of hunger, and especially of Jewish hunger in Polish literature, Polish culture. Joanna Tokarska-Bakir's text on the post-war anti-Jewish killings in Ostrowiec. It's called The Girl and the Painter, Ostrowiec, March 19, 1945. And then at the end, the already mentioned text by Elżbieta Janicka, which is mapping, in fact, the debate about the initiated by the neighbors, and then since ended in this paper by 2004. And it is called An Innocence Recovered, the Gross Affair as the result of the Polish state historical politics. That title somehow summarizes in a way what is the barrier that the book is trying to break. This is the backlash of history and kind of the generic attitude of the establishment and of the Polish culture as it is thought, as it is thought of, and kind of promulgated by the government and educational establishment, and especially by the Polish Catholic Church.
One of the things that struck me, and I think will strike everyone who reads this book, is that these problems that have come to the fore in the last 25 years or 30 years, since the collapse of the Soviet Union and so on and so forth, and the rebuilding of an autocratic regime and suppression of knowledge. These are not new problems. These are old. They go back perhaps even to the inception of the concept of the nation state. And Konrad, I wonder, you know, if you could talk about that a little bit. It's very, you know.
Yeah, thank you. I think that refers to the main focus of this book, which I'd like to talk about. And this focus obviously is well, modern Jewish history in Poland, but it's a focus that comes after realization that this history unfolded in a permanent presence of anti-Semitism and exclusion from the side of the Catholic majority, and that this exclusion resulted initially from Catholicism as both a religion and political ideology, but later became a core part of the ideas for the Polish nation and for the national community. And with this realization, this book, in a way, it's a portrait of a cultural and academic project that all the authors take part in. I think we call this the New School of Polish Jewish Studies, and this project, in a way, occurred thanks to the efforts of all the authors and all these individuals who have enough courage and sensitivity to look at the Polish Jewish history as history of private and public Jewish life, and history of violence and repression that resulted from religion and nationalism as a concept of nation, which was and is a very mainstream cultural and political ideology, and which is one of the frames that this book opposes. So if I could, I'd like to expand your first question and talk a bit more about the two frames which I can identify that the authors are actually referring to and attempting to break. So this first frame and was related to this primary realization that which the New School is founded on, is that very early in the Polish history, anti-Semitism and exclusion of Jews has been a core part of the identity of the Catholic majority. And as this majority developed to the history into a modern nation, the pre-modern anti-Semitism that was part of it was not disarmed, but was rather incorporated into the very violent social and political ideologies, which today are perceived and treated not as extreme, but as mainstream. And so the history of the violence of the 20th century, including the Holocaust, in respect to the Polish history, cannot be seen just as an external influence, in this case of German Nazis, but as a cultural framework resulting also from the very inside of the Polish and also Central and Eastern European cultures. And in this way, this is the first frame of the two frameworks that this book opposes. The second framework is more recent, and I see it as a product of the fall of the Iron Curtain in the 1980s, which resulted with a Holocaust history becoming a part of global consciousness, and as you mentioned before, of global politics. And as the Eastern Europe and Poland started to reintegrate with the global West, a sort of political pragmatism emerged, which consisted in a tendency to look for a new start in Eastern Europe and to see anti-Semitism and ethnic violence in a way as a thing of the past, which is to be left behind on the way towards bright, democratic and pluralist future. Or even it was a tendency to see the Holocaust history as an obstacle on the way toward this future. And this point of view, this sort of orientation has many roots. Some of them are probably just a result of change of generation and a sort of distrust towards survivors and their testimonies and their stories. Some of them, those roots were created, I believe, in a general American social context and resulted from a hope that in the end of 20th century, racisms are already a thing of the past, and we know they are not. And some of the roots, I think, are purely political thinking, that in Poland, which was a birthplace of solidarity movement, and later was perceived as a model country of the expanded European Union, Poland needed to be present and seen as a modern, forward-looking and a pluralist country. All evidence was suggesting opposite, but this political pragmatism of 80s, 90s, and then after 2000 was a very powerful driving force. And it has a paradoxical outcome, which is that this pragmatic optimism facilitated a sort of alliance between cultural actors outside Poland who wanted to see a Polish Jewish revival happening, and also followers of Polish antisemitism, Polish antisemites of various political affiliations, many of them very, very cultural and polite, who wanted to gain audience and absolution out of this encounter. And I would define this as a second framework that this book addresses. And but importantly, I think, especially for like in relation to the second frame, this book is important as a translation project, because it is designed to give the English language audience an access to texts, which are the chapters of this book, by authors and thinkers who make efforts to break these frames, and especially that they use this with use of language of critical thinking, which I hope to also refer to later. I think I'll stop now.
So if I understand what you're saying, the narrative against which this new school is working is a narrative in which emphasizes Poland's victimization over centuries as a Catholic unity, and the problem of Jedwabne, the problem of Polish participation in the crimes of the Holocaust, runs counter to the dominant Polish framework of Poland as victim, as Poland as so-called Christ of nations, and that the historiography that you and your colleagues in this volume have been engaged in is somehow undermining that by demonstrating the reality of the anti-Semitism that led to collaboration and to murders during the Holocaust. It is not trying to prove that the Holocaust was initiated by Poland, or that all of Poland is guilty for the Holocaust. It is simply trying to show that Polish people working within the environment of an inherited Polish culture did these things, for which there was a continuum of thinking that goes back centuries. Am I getting that correct?
I think so. I mean, Irena, do you want to respond to that?
I think that this is this book contains texts that belong to various domains of humanities. Some of them are historical, some of them are almost ethnographic, some of them are literary analysis, and they show all of them together, besides proving concrete stories, showing concrete stories, showing concrete events. They are talking about the culture. They are talking about the culture of exclusion of Jews, of misrepresentation of the relationship between these two groups of inhabitants of the same territory. And this is so. I would not. This shows very concretely and in big details the untruthfulness of the criteria that are applied to this history in the contemporary Polish discourse, official discourse, and in the culture. And that culture, of course, you are right, it does not start now. It did not start recently. It is embedded in the joining of Polish nationhood as an idea with the Catholic, with the idea of Catholic, with this kind of necessary linking with Catholicism, which therefore precludes the taking into consideration the possibility of the complicity in victimizing the weaker part, and discards any attempt at modifying the vision of Second World War. This is why the Second World War is so central, and the Holocaust is so central today to the discourse of everyday Polish life, surprisingly, yes, because it's an open wound, it's an open field which requires from this dominant ideology, requires continuous denial and continuous kind of amending deniability, which is impossible, because this is like like a spot that you have on a tablecloth, that no matter how often you wash it, it is coming up and it is coming up, and it will not be erased. It's there.
Is this why so many people have remarked there's anti-Semitism without Jews?
Yeah, I mean, it is both historical and embedded in the very, if I may say so, in the very way the religion, the Catholicism, is now proposed, or I don't know if it is in the very nature of Catholicism, or if it is in the way that the Catholicism is being kind of performed today in everyday life, and also in all of its versions that are present at every step of culture in Poland. There is a very Catholicism permeates, even there when it is not stated. It permeates the everyday of life, and therefore it directs. I mean, it is like it's formulated in contradiction to the Jewishness, to its origin.
So would you say, Konrad, would you say that the conclusions that we have to come to after thinking through these problems are going to be largely pessimistic about the possibility of Jewish-Polish dialogue? Or
well,
Jewish
I don't think that dialogue should be the ultimate aim. I think, in a way, possibilities to speak will be an ultimate aim, and I And I think that's what I would really look at, because I mean, you mentioned this this mythology of victimhood, of Polish victimhood as in a way core of this, in a way, pretty much 19th century romantic beliefs or fantasies. But in fact, what is the role of the narrative of the Polish victimhood? I would define it as a cover for hegemony of quite classic interplay of a dominant group and the minority group, where the dominant is really exercising its violence towards the minority while narrating that it itself, the majority, is the victim. So I would really look for a sort of opening of a possibility to talk from a position which is other that of the dominant group, which in case of Poland is a Catholic majority, and if the outcome of this opening would be integrating of the Holocaust history with the history of Poland, which I believe the authors of this book are effectively doing, even better so. But I think the opening of possibilities to articulate historical truth, but also of a voice which is, for example, a voice of the Holocaust survivor, or a voice of a victim, which, because of this imbalance of a possibility to speak, is and was extremely hard within the context of the Polish culture and within the context of this, so to say, global influence. I mean, that's again one of the aims, and I mean, that refers to for me to how I define the new school of Polish Jewish studies, because that's another issue. That's another important matter of how this group, this new, so to say, cultural project that we are presenting. I mean, what's its characteristic, what's its features, but that's I would say another different matter. But yeah, I in this field, I in this regard, I would say it's primarily about the possibilities to speak, of opening of voice, of a non-dominant voice to be hearable and present and credible.
Yeah. What do you think the prospects for this might be in the coming years in Poland?
I mean,
there are
sure.
obviously historians such as yourself, younger generation historians, who are looking into these issues, who are very adamant in their beliefs and so on. But there is this orchestrated marginalization of your voices. Do you see a way out from this?
Well, I think like this sort of efforts that, again, I see in the author of this book, I see as the only way. I mean, yes, it's true that many of the chapters of this book are addressing the current political situation in Poland, and especially the current far right government and the politicians and their attempt to silence and to suppress many fields of research, including historical, but also any sort of cultural analysis, especially on the research on the Polish co-perpetration of the Holocaust. But I think it's very important to remember that these politicians are not just some populist invaders to a situation which is otherwise healthy and hopeful. So and what did occur before this government has been installed was quite often a situation when, in a much more polite and cultured way, the same suppression did exist, especially in relation to voices that were expressing, well, testimonies, especially that would go against the myth of the Polish innocence.
Yeah.
And so the current government's voice, I see it as a product of a much older problem of Polish culture and also other Eastern European culture, because this issue is not limited to Poland but to many of its neighbors, which I think is a longer continuity, which needs to be addressed and needs to be countered.
Irena, do you have something?
It's if you look at these trends or political trends of today in Eastern Europe, in the West, and at the war that is happening just in Ukraine, in the middle of of our lives all the time. Now one would be very pessimistic, of course, but I feel that the connection that these countries now have with the external world, that is that these nationalisms that are growing and growing, yet they are interconnected and not isolated. We cannot by now completely close all the world. I feel that this is our role somehow, especially as who are outside, is to make sure that the voices, the amazing voices, and incredibly courageous, but also the group working on these issues is not very big, but it is a powerful, incredibly powerful group of people who are extremely well educated, extremely devoted, extremely capable, and producing work that is of absolute value. That if we can somehow make it possible for them to work and make them part of community by amplifying their voices, that here I see our role. I see, and this is part of this kind of an optimism of action that I recommend, which is different from the optimism of a historian.
That's a good note, I think, on which to end our discussion. And I'd like to ask Alex now to open up the questions and the questions from the audience.
Thank you, and thank you both for this wonderful discussion so far. And before we go to the questions, I just want to say thank you again to Helena Dotner and Elżbieta Janicka for curating this series. And I'm going to put again the link into the chat for all the upcoming events. I hope you'll join us again. We have a lot of really interesting questions, and we have about 10 minutes left, so we'll see how much we can get to. We're going to have two questions that are related that I'd like to ask together. One viewer is asking about how Polish children are taught in public schools in Poland about anti-Semitism and the Holocaust. And in tandem with that, another attendee posits that the Polin Museum in Poland is doing a great job with educating the young Polish generation. So why is a book like this necessary, considering that impression that this viewer has? So perhaps you could speak a bit about those two questions in tandem, the kind of education of youth and the role the Polin Museum has in it.
Konrad, do you want to, should I start?
I mean, I can talk a bit about Polin Museum later, but okay. In terms of the education, I don't have much knowledge, so I'm not.
Yeah, yes, I think that the educational, I mean, you know that there is religion in every school in Poland. That is, there is a religion in a school is just preparation for participation in the rites, besides history of Catholicism and so on. This is not, it's not a topic It's a practice, basically, in every school. And you can, the children, I read that children in some, especially in bigger cities, often don't go to this. They have some kind of like remedial ethics or something like that. But anyhow, there is a total control to an extent in which people let themselves be controlled of the educational sector by the Catholic Church. So this is what I want to say about this. So you, Konrad, talk about the museum.
The museum, I remember when it was built, I had quite high hopes about its functioning and also about the role it would play in a place where it's actually being built, which is the heart of the Nazi ghetto in Warsaw. I must say that all these hopes has been quite in vain. It's been I was initially quite disappointed about the outcome of this museum, and I mean the exhibition, and I mean also the reference and the addressing of this museum towards the most significant surrounding issue, which is the history of the Holocaust. So the very design process of the Polish Museum has been heavily influenced by Polish politicians, especially towards the end of the design process, and that refers primarily to the Holocaust Gallery and also to the gallery of the post-war, which I think has been reduced by half, and I think and that has been done with a very vocalized influence of the government, of Poland's government back then, and the politicians actually fearing, as far as I understand it, that too much of the problematic issues, which would be everything that we are discussing here today, would be touched by this exhibition. So in my opinion, the way that the museum is designed is to minimize the presence of a continuity of repression throughout the history. If you look at the galleries, so to say, of the 18th century, which only touches to the subject of the blood libel, for example, which has been quite present throughout all the Polish modern era, and or the Holocaust Gallery, which is located on the street, on the layout of the street that has been one of the main streets of Warsaw Ghetto, but actually doesn't have any reference to the street itself, to the Zamenhof street that has been, before the destruction of the ghetto, has been located over there. Not to mention the history of the 19th century and the Polish nationalism, which is barely touched, and not in reference to any of the issues that we've been discussing here today. So I was seriously disappointed after this museum has been built, and I think its potential could have been much bigger and much more brave.
Okay. Another viewer is asking about the incident that in March 1998, Pope John Paul II wrote a statement about a call for penitence for the Holocaust by Christians in Nazi-occupied countries. And this viewer is asking, how did the Polish people receive this statement from Pope John Paul II, this request for words of reconciliation? Related to, Irena, you were talking about the role of the church in education. So how has the church dealt with this, at that moment and in a more broader sense?
I'm sorry, I cannot reply to this. I don't know. I'm not a historian of the church, and I don't know. The church had a mass, as far as I remember, which was the the kind of the penitent mass run by the then Cardinal of Poland, and that was, as far as I know, that was it. But I may not know about. I don't. The church is not involved in work of. So, you know, but besides this kind of something that is called dialogue, which is a very doubtful, as Konrad already said, which is a very doubtful concept, which is in one committee that I know about, but I don't see any work on the part of the church in that domain.
I believe it is very much telling that in relation to the Holocaust history, all the Catholic archives in Poland, I think majority of them are not accessible by the decision of the bishops and the Catholic clergy, which I think is very telling about their position and their abilities to take part in any sort of evaluation of the Catholic history in relation to the position of the Jewish communities of Poland, which I think this impact has been very dark.
We spoke about, so we've spoken a little bit about the role of the church, and we've also heard about the role of the government. Do you have anything else to say about who in the Polish context is kind of supporting these the Jewish exclusion, in the words of the questioner? And on the other hand, can you talk also about who is trying to break this cycle? Is it just the academics that are in this book and in this series of books that we're talking about in this series, or are there other members of the Polish civic society that are part of that process?
I think that we mentioned here the academic, the establishment. This is what is called the establishment. That is the government, the ministries of culture, education, the people who are dividing funds for education, for museums, for culture, and so on. All of them are concentrated on building up of the image of Poland as the innocent victim, and victim only. And that is done in various ways. Some of them were more extreme. Some of them, like the Prime Minister Morawiecki, putting flowers on the tombs of collaborators, or of Brygada Świętokrzyska, of the military group, underground military group of the war, which was collaborating with the Germans and which was murdering the Jews. So there is a very big rewriting of history, or writing of history, that is done with the support and active participation of the state on various levels. And that active participation of the state consists also of by introducing laws and regulations, and by distributing of funds and so on, consists of not allowing the real development of this work that is presented in this book. That is, every young scholar who is planning his career and planning his life and so on has to think twice, if not many more times, before he or she engages into this topic. And people who do it, in fact, are people who have a real passion. There's people who really have the devotion to truth, but also some of them maybe have some special, situation which allows them to do it. I don't want to discredit people who don't do it, but it is not reasonable from the practical point of view to engage in these subjects. And there are no there are various institutions that exist from before, which are gradually being conquered by these people who are supported by the establishment. And you can see it. You can see it in the publications. You can see it in publications abroad. You can see it. The government is, or the government, I mean by the government, I mean the state is building new institutions. It's conquering the other institutions, and it's building the new institutions, and it's gradually, completely pushing out the consensus that existed before, even though this consensus was imperfect. But there were certain things that you were not permitted to say, you were not permitted to do. Now you have a regular fascist basically parts of establishment, and people saying on radio and television things that were punishable even 15 years ago. And again, I don't want to say that 15 years ago it was perfect. It was not even good, but it was definitely much better than it is today.
I believe that any effort to in a way prevent it, if it happens on a private level, the first step would be to in a way feel the possibilities to talk openly, almost against the entire, well, I use the word discourse. So what is permissible to say in a public sphere? I believe the poem that the book opens with, the poem by Jacek Podsiadło, is for me, in my personal view, is in a way a reflection of this sort of effort, a reference back to own family and recognizing anti-Semitic behaviors in the voice of all mother, and then the problem of actually seeing this violence in the closest of people, and I believe that refers to the culture in general. So once I think the ability to speak beyond this sort of dense and fascist discourse is only possible when someone actually realizes that they are part of a very, very familiar, very private, very intimate sphere that cannot really continue as it was before, cannot really continue in the shape that has been continued for many generations and many decades and many centuries actually. And I believe that it's only then when someone realizes that it's actually the culture that blocks us from talking, that there's only then that we're able to think about and talk about history with our own voice.
We're just about time. Perhaps one final question, and then any last remarks that you'd like to share, please feel free. Some of the people are asking about resources that exist to teach Polish Jewish history, to learn, and of course your book and the books that we're covering in the series. But do you have any other recommendations for resources? And particularly, one viewer is asking on YouTube about resources for children. Are there any resources?
I think we can do the following. We can prepare some kind of a list of books, and maybe you can then attach it to the video when you are going to be sending it, because it is difficult to really go, though I know about some, of course.
Okay, that would be great. Yeah.
Various resources, but it's are we going to spell the names? There's a technical difficulty in this delivery.
Okay, that would be great. And any closing remarks, or should we pause there for, and we'll of course have a lot more to talk about in the other events in this series.
Well, I would like to say one thing, which is that the discussion today highlights that cultural activity reinforces the political reality, and the political reality reinforces the cultural activity into a closed space. And if I understand what the value of this scholarship and this inquiry of the new school is, it's to break open that closed space and to enable people to have a much freer understanding of themselves that, even though it's difficult, will essentially liberate them from a past that in effect compels a certain form of exclusion of Jews, of others, and the creation of a world that to themselves is undesirable because it requires this continuous denial. So to me, this is the real value of this scholarship. And I encourage all of the people in our community to pay attention to this series that we are conducting here at YIVO, and to again try to get a copy of this book. Encourage your library to order it and to read the really splendid contributions that are in it. So I want to thank Irena and Konrad. I want to thank Helena Dottner and Elżbieta for curating this, and Alex and Julia and Jonah for making it happen. Thank you very much.